It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megafoon Rugby.
Welcome back to the Lekker Rugby Pod, episode 78. Harry and I have been having a chat about this past weekend's European finals and the World Club Championships that's now been sort of finalized. So welcome back, Harry, firstly.
How's it, MV? Are we getting tired of being so right? I mean, our previews were almost took all the fun out of the games. They were exactly how it went.
Yeah. Well, your preview, I was sat here and, mouth agape. How do you know all these things? So you were quite clever there, I must be honest. So before we continue, let me just tell you what we're going to be talking about today. Firstly, we're going to talk about Challenge Cup, the Champions Cup, and then the latest iteration of the Harry Index. And then we're going to talk about the Club Championship and why we should use the Harry Index as a qualifier for the Club Championship, seeing that you're always right. So what do you think of that?
I mean, something like the Harry Index. The point is that when you start doing these gerrymandered parliamentary, backbench constituency coalition stuff, you end up with a very weird championship. The one that doesn't survive the loft tests, where everyone goes, really? So Bath is not in, but Moana Pacifica is? I mean, come on. Yeah.
Just on that subject quickly, just tell us, what was the score between Chiefs and Moana Pacifica this past weekend, just to put it into perspective?
I don't know, it was 1,000,000-0. It was 1,000,000 to something, and there was a penalty try at the end, and it was a good example of how a team can battle for a while, but in the end, in a long comp, and quality comes out. The Chiefs are clearly about 3 miles higher than everyone else in that comp, with only the Crusaders having a say.
85-7. I'll put you out of your misery.
85-7.
Why we are so upset and why our friend Johan van Graan was indignant, let's use that fancy word, because Moana Pacifica would qualify this Club World Championships, but the Bulls and Bath, and like you said, that they won't. So we'll get back to that just now. But before we do that, let's talk about this past weekend's European Cup finals. Firstly, the Challenge Cup, you called it, you predicted it, and it played out exactly as you said it would. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so there was no surprises there. Obviously, Lyon is a proud club, but they've been falling off a cliff lately. And so they had sort of stumbled their way into this cup final of the Challenge Cup. But in the top 14, which is their bread and butter, their credential, the thing that they actually do for a living, they have really tanked. And so it was going to have to be sort of a Samsonian, one final act. Can we bring the temple down? Can we take down this very deep, very well coached team that has both magic? Van Russell can be a magician, but it also has infantry, tank battalions. You can bring Tank Toy in to supplement Will Stewart. So you got a Lions prop and then a world champion prop coming at you. So it just had that sort of grind down inevitability. I thought the big magic of the story, though, was Johan van Graan going through, lonely boy abroad, going to Munster, things not working out exactly, but one of the greatest, backers of Munster, and as you know, I'm connected with a lot of them. They have nothing but good words to say about Johan. For them, he was a young coach finding his feet, did nothing but build bridges. They love him. They would take him back right now. He set up a lot of systems in place that are helping them. It was an instrumental in them landing Clayton McMillan, the Chiefs coach, one of the great coaches in the Southern Hemisphere right now. So I think Johan, he learned as much from being the coach of Munster as his players did. Then he brought that over to Bath, had a very, very strong backer, an owner that really is willing to, to give his guy what he says he needs. It wasn't all obvious. It wasn't just, getting obvious stars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was specific types of guys that he built. And then you have, proper muscle in the pack, what you would expect Johan to have grown up around, Affies, Bulls, make sure that your pack is unassailable, but some real characters in there, like an Alfie Barbieri, who looks like a mad pirate, with his teeth out at the end, grinning and licking people's faces and stuff. Finn Russell, a real maverick. I mean, Johan looks like the schoolboy with his little textbook, and he's all put together. He keeps his emotions very in check. So for me, it was at the end. Johan, having gone through all these different gauntlets where you're doing this and that, and you're telling people you love them and you believed in them, and then he goes and sits down on the 22 line by himself with his little book, in front of him, cross-legged, and just kind of breathes. And you, in that one face, that one moment, you could see how much emotion a quiet man can have, and how undemonstrative he is, and yet how he was staring down a cliff. If he had lost that to a cratering Lyon, with all the talent at its disposal, and the big bank and the stadium coming in the center of town, in a very well-heeled, posh place, ooh, there would have been whispers. Maybe we didn't get the right guy. Who else is out there? Oh, Michael Checker. Something would happen, and you'd start to look around. So Johan had the look of someone who said, I've got the first little cup in the beginning. I've got this little consolation cup now. Now let me go get the big one. And you could just see that his players celebrating. Sure, I thought Johan was already getting into his book planning for the premiership, and making sure he locks that down, because then he has credentials that are superior to Franco Smith, superior to Franz Ludeker, who's doing very well in Japan, because then he can say, I was able to do things more than one thing at once. I can plan a cup, and I can plan a league, and I can play 2 players. I can handle injury. He's had plenty of injuries. And I also think you could tell the players really respect him. He's not sometimes young coaches get too much in with the players, and they want to be one of the guys. I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying there's different styles. Johan, even though he is young, looks young, he kind of has an old man feel about him too. So he kind of has just about that reserve, and maybe it's the Praetorian reserve, like, don't jump on my back, don't, throw water on my face. He's got a kind of he is the boss. Yeah. So I thought that was a great moment. There were other moments in that game that were worth the price of admission, but everyone knew that it was more of a Bath had to tick this box. And if they didn't, it was more of a big deal if they lost than it was a big deal if they won. But it's always nice to see players like Sam Underhill, Quinn Rue, guys that they've never really gotten their full due at test level or even club level, and they're having just a fun time. Let's go out, let's go into Cardiff, and let's have some fun.
You talked about him not showing any emotion, but obviously experiencing emotion. It reminds me of that saying about the duck, serenely floating along the lake, but the legs are going, the little feet are going crazy at the bottom. How much of this do you think, and I'm going to be asking a very long-term question here, but how much of this was an addition, maybe for a Rassie replacement? You mentioned Franz Ludeker, we know Franco Smith is in the running. A couple of candidates that are sort of, doing a bit of a quiet addition, maybe for the box. What are the chances?
There's no job position in rugby quite like the Springbok coach. It's an unbelievable straddle, because if you're winning, it's probably one of the best jobs in rugby, and if you're losing, it's got to be the worst. You have a leash the size of a Chihuahua. You don't have a long leash. You get the quick hook. Lose 2 or 3 in a row. Just like with the All Blacks. I mean, they were thinking very seriously of tossing Ian Foster, who ended up going to the final of the World Cup and losing by a couple of points, or 1 point, whatever. And they were going to axe him if he didn't win at Loftus in 2022, 23, whatever. There was a moment there where he was right on the bubble. So if you have a good job, everyone loves you, you're playing big games at a club, do you want that? Because that if you do anything that's a hiccup, your wife's going to go, and so you moved us away from that beautiful house we had in Bath with our kids. We're having so much fun. And you're like, yo, but I had to take it. And the truth is, if you're a rugby man, if you bleed Safa, if you grew up the way we did with all of our dreams and hopes, I've fantasized about it, which makes no sense. I'm never going to become the ball coach. I would think about 1 second. So I think he would do it. But it's such a gamble too, because, these guys, they have good lives. Franco Smith did get Glasgow over the line. Looks like Franz Ludeker is helping Kubota Spears. They just beat the Wild Knights, which classic clashes with Safas, by the way. Malcolm Marks just storming through. You know, life is also about how happy you are. And you're guaranteed to have some very unhappy times if you are making selections and you got to drop this guy, you're going to put this guy in, Cameron, Evan, who do I pick? You're always making 40% of the country hate you. And then when you try to get new blood in, you're like, oh, you dropped that test, you lost to Wales and Bloemfontein, you're terrible. And then you come across and you win. It's like, oh my God, you're the, you know, the prophet, the savior of South Africa. It's an up and down, you know, whereas you're not really facing that roller coaster at Glasgow, Bath, Kubota Spears, wherever that is. You're probably just going to dinner and no one even knows who you are. I mean, barely. There's no anonymity for a BOK coach. Everywhere you go, how you tip, how you carry your bags from spar, how you know, who was that girl you were talking to over there by the side? You know, everything is on the table. And it all comes down to this. You got to win, baby. If you win, we love you. You're smart. You're great. If you lose, there's some very special cuck words I can use to describe you. And they turn on you in a second. And if you thought they loved you, you're wrong. They love you while you're winning. And they don't love you when you're not. And there's very few exceptions to that, by the way. There are some people who have the charisma and character and personality, you can probably forgive them. Even the most likable guy, Alistair Coetzee, really likable guy. Like very difficult to find a person who doesn't like Alistair. But by the end, people were just, you know, hating him. So, I think it's a conundrum. I think Johan takes it, though, if he's offered it. To answer your question, I think all these things are auditions, and they're like stock markets with embargoes and tariffs galore. They go up and down. So Franco's stock was at its highest as he was taunting you guys at Loftus about a year ago. I mean, that was the moment, right? His stock has slipped a little bit now. It looks like he can be had. He can be worked out. Johan has an interesting, to me, he has the better CV because his resume is a steady, marching, upward handling of big personalities. He's handled Finn Russell better than Gregor Townsend has. He's been able to keep people like Tank du Toit happy on the bench sometimes, or Will Stewart, you know, like that kind of personality. I think he's a soft touch. Maybe his youth helps him. Maybe he's able to relate to a 32-year-old player because I don't know how old Johan is, but it's not that old. So we'll see what happens next.
I laughed at our friend Hugh Griffin. He said he gets so upset because now the South Africans are claiming him. The Pretorians are claiming him because he comes from Pretoria and he's from Office. And the Munster guys are claiming him as well. It's actually it's a very popular guy. But just on the subject of the BOK coach there that you talked about, it's not a question of, you were just describing a normal BOK ascension, if you want to call it that, you know, following up Alistair Coetzee or whatever. Following in Rassie's footsteps. That's a different kettle of fish altogether, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to be a very self-possessed man. You're going to have mastery of your emotions. You have to know who you are. I think there's a character that I just watched do that, which was Joe Schmidt for the Wallabies. Very quiet guy. He took over after Eddie Jones. So imagine if Eddie Jones had won. I guess that's the analogy. And then you have Joe Schmidt. You know, it's like, oh, he's not as exciting. You know, Rassie is an excitement machine. So if you're a new coach and you're not going to be, I don't think it's going to look good if you try to out Rassie. I think you're going to have to stay right in your lane. Johan van Graan would be a good example of someone who's a technocrat. He's always been a line-out student. He's been a big proponent of the carry clean game. And when you give up, when you say no more phases, he's an analyst by nature. A little more like Nienaber, actually. He's got some fire. I mean, he can deliver fire and brimstone speeches and such, but he's not known as that. So I guess the question that would come more than anything with a guy like Johan would be, who is he bringing with him? Or more particularly, who would he keep? You know, would he have Don Human for continuity in the scrum? Would he have Stick on the collisions and the phase 2 plus cycles? Could he lure a guy like Jerry Flannery to stay, Felix Jones? I don't know. I don't know how that would work. But in the coaching game nowadays, one of the biggest advantages that Rassie has is his team. I mean, he has the best assistant coach group, better than Andy Farrell does, better than Razor Robertson by far, and probably just a bit better than Gautier in France, although that's also a really good group. So yeah, it'd be a lot about, could Johan get an old fox, an old wise man to stay? Could he bring in something new? Politics always is going to matter in the Springbok successorship. There's a mood, and there's always gonna be a mood for a rebranding, a rebirth, a modernity of the Springbok brand, and it cannot look too much like an passing it over to an old from the old days. There has to be a little bit of new blood. There's also some retiring players that are in the mix now that are intriguing, so you wouldn't want to look too far past a guy like Sia Kolisi and Dwayne Vermeulen, for example, like a very weird, odd couple almost. There's people right now in the playing mix that have the charisma and the trust that could also take it to the next level. So one thing is for sure, replacing Rassie is like a movie of its own, and who would want to?
That's actually a good movie title as well. Trademark, Harry. Quick. Patent it or something. I'll tell you what, I want to talk about that red card. But before we get to the red card, I just want to say, I think Sam Underleaf is the scariest rugby player I've ever seen in my entire life. Because that guy runs down, I'm going to run like anything, get out of his way. I tell you what, that guy looks like a machine. But talking about that red card, I mean, that was a red card all day long. Look at Neerling Forshire, and Damien Willemse, and it's just not the same thing. There's no consistency, and we saw it again last night in the SA Cup final. I'm not sure you probably didn't watch it, but there were a couple of funny calls there in terms of red cards, and like again up to the referee's interpretation. What did you think of that red card, and specifically about Tillman van Delft, our friend's girlfriend, Ollie Davidson? What did you think of her performance in that final?
Yeah, geez, we don't want to get someone in trouble here. He's probably just talking platonically, but he does seem to really love Holly. So we search, we yearn for consistency, whether it's punishment in a family. My brother, you got away with something, it starts from when you're 5 years old. And then you go into school and, it's not fair. You did this, I did that, I get cuts, you don't. And then you go into the workplace. Oh, this guy, he's my manager now. Everyone knows he's a skellum. How did he do it? And then we go into, sport, elite sport, and criminal law. And you are always going to live a life in which things don't really make sense. There's always going to be a guy who makes more than you or less than you, where you really should be less than him, but you're more than him, whatever. Okay. I think the reason why that argument that we all make as parents to our kids of life's not fair doesn't ring true here is because it's actually quite doable to have a system. These are repeatable events. They don't exist along a huge spectrum. When you're talking about contact, it's actually quite easy to discern what is a rugby play and what is not a rugby play. So Taniela Tupou tripped someone in Super Rugby this weekend. To me, that's a red. You trip someone. I don't care if nothing happens, no one gets hurt. When you do a sliding, flying, trip tackle, you're red all day long. You're sent off, back in the old parlance. You're sent off, so now we call it a red, fine, 80 minutes, you're gone. When we're talking about contact gone wrong with the new advent and the important, essential advent of head safety protocol, to be seen to be doing something, in other words, to beat class action litigation, so you don't look consciously indifferent and impervious to risk. So they've got these things now where it's more about the head, but it shouldn't only be about the head. It's also always and forever about, was it a rugby play that you were trying to execute and you got it a bit wrong by, this much, or was it actually foul from the start? So we have no arms and I just shoulder charge you. To me, that's always meaningfully more different than if I do wrap, I get low, I'm knitting for shit, I'm on my knees on the ground, and you're a falling carrier, and then I nip you in the chin. Come on. This is easily and obviously calibratable as that's not that bad, but the flying shoulder, no arms, eyes closed, hair on fire, smash into your face. Of course it's a red, Sam Cane in the World Cup final. Red, easy, no problem. If it hits on the chest, Siya Kolisi World Cup final, and it slides up, it's a little different now, right? So now we're looking yellow. Maybe it does slide up, maybe it doesn't. Fair enough. Damian Willemse shrugged that shoulder. That's what got him. He was probably not looking for the contact at all. And then at the final second, it happened to him because someone thrust the carrier into him. Connor Evans threw the guy into him. So then he did that little shrug. That got him. That gives him a red. When Nathan Faucher went down to his knee, he was specifically trying in his head, in his good big prop head, I got to get low, got to get low, got to get low. He got as low as you could possibly get if he wasn't a snail. That's a harsh one. When you have someone flying in the air without, with recklessness, now you're putting yourself in the doubt. You're in the lap of the gods, so you shouldn't complain later if you do cop head. But I think overlaying or underlaying that all has to be whether it was an actual rugby play that looked like a rugby play that you'd be coached to do, and then you get it a little bit wrong versus something that is foul, a trip, a swinging arm, something that's incredibly late, a super late tackle, even if it doesn't hit their head, but it's so late that you could, someone's not even thinking they should be hit. That's a very dangerous thing, very foul thing. So I think we can get together and do this codified. We can be better because it's stupid right now that you have such wildly wide outcomes in carding. People have lost their mind about it. Only has to be ahead. So if I come 3 seconds late and gut punch your kidney punch the fly off after he's kicked the ball, he's in a vulnerable position, and I just come and just swing my arm and smack you in your kidneys, I mean, that's a very foul play. It doesn't matter if you're a tough guy, you shrug it off and you walk away. It doesn't matter, it didn't hit your head. Some of these croc rolls, thankfully, those are outlawed. They really did crumple up a body. I mean, there were examples of people who lost their whole career off it. And so it's the same action whether it does ruin your career or it doesn't. But it's a foul, terrible play to take two guys, crumple someone up who's vulnerable, and basically explode their knee. So, I think we can do better. We have the brains to do it. It's one of those things that has to be centralized or it's not going to make sense. You've got to centralize it in clear, codes, and then you have to have a single body that acts as appeals court. Give the players an opportunity to really appeal, not like Damian Willemse, who was basically held over a barrel. He either had to pick Bok games or he had to pick Stormers games, and so he just took the guilty plea because it allowed him to miss Babas, and that's it, maybe. But then that screws his club. So have a proper, quick, effective, thorough judiciary. Should take no longer than about a day, really. It's unlike any crime because you always have the video. But here's the evidence. It's not that many eventualities. We actually know what we're looking at really quickly. Give the result. Give the player 1 day to go to the actual appeals court, which sits forever. It's one panel forever, so they can match their results to what they did 2 years ago, 5 years ago, this day. And then it's more continuous. And then they turn the appeal quickly and have it where the appeal doesn't cost you. It doesn't cost you to do it. And let's see. And then you have your answer quicker. But right now, my problem with this is so many fans are turned off by it. So many fans are cynical about it from every country. So we're not picking on one or the other. No one's getting screwed here, particularly, except maybe you could argue Pacific Island players who seem to get extraordinary penalties for everything they do. But I think we need to do better, and I think we should do better by 2027 World Cup.
Which brings us neatly to the matter of 20-minute red cards. Isn't that a bit of a cop-out to, make sure that when the referee screws up a little bit and it's being too subjective, then it sort of rescues the game almost?
Yeah, well, the tip-off about what this red 20 was that they called it the red. They didn't have to call it the red. If the clue as to why they were saying this is going to be the red, pretty much, is they called it red. They could have called it orange. Could call it purple. If they had done that, we would have all been more okay. Because there was this sneaking sense that in the chasing head safety had caused us to do too many reds when they were just doing a rugby play, got it wrong. So then the example would be Sam Cane and Sia Kolisi in the World Cup final, which has an outsized effect on this whole debate, by the way. It's basically a New Zealand / Australian move, a push to have the red 20. It wasn't from any other place. And it's because there's a league influence there, rugby league influence there, and the perception that it cost them a World Cup final. It didn't. We know that. It's like sliding doors. You keep playing that out. By the end, there were 2 cards. So there was not that much time where it was New Zealand down by a man. It was a lot of that World Cup final was either equal or the other way around. So I think the problem was that then they rolled it out. They were cynically calling it the red. And then mocking anyone who said, whoa, don't you know there's also still a straight red? How stupid are you? All these people opposing the red 20 don't realize that there's really still a straight red. Yeah, but they were never using the straight red. So who's the idiot? We were not idiots. We knew that what you were doing to us was you were training us to think of a red always as 20, except for that really weird, unbelievable 1 in a trillion moment when someone, balls up a fist and smashes it into the face of the referee. There's your straight red. I said, what happened to the straight red? It went away. So, and referees are like all humans. They have private conversations. They were instructed to get this thing done quickly. So you yellow, refer, bunker, you keep going. It was all about keeping the game going. And err on the side of calm TMO can take a look and see if it should be stay a yellow or go to red. By the way, it was never unyellowed, which would be a true thing for a TMO to do sometimes. Hey, referee, actually, you were wrong on the first place. Come back out. And you gave me all these levels. So now you have a referee and a TMO having to navigate 4 levels: play on, penalty, yellow, red 20, straight red, 5 levels. I mean, human nature is you're going to find the middle. So the middle always seems like yellow bunker. Yellow bunker, yellow bunker. Easy. It's off mine. A shared responsibility. Don't blame me. Blame the guy in the bunker. So that's where we're headed. My opposition to it is this. It was built on 2 falsehoods. One was that cards ruin games. No, they don't. You take top level, good team versus good team, evened it out. It was pretty much 50-50. So it didn't make that much thing. It costs you about 0.5 points per 10 minutes, but other things also cost you that. Scrum penalties, injuries. There's all kinds of factors. And so the point was it didn't ruin anything. This was just sour grape stuff. And I don't like it that they almost gave credence to it to say, we've got to make sure that we don't ruin matches for spectators. I don't think that's true. And once again, you're catering to the bad fans. You're catering to the worst fans instead of listening to the best fans. The second thing is it was an edge. There were teams that were red carded more than other teams. And it was constant of high tackling teams. We're going to get carded more. The highest tackling teams right now in the world are Super Rugby teams. The most carded teams in the World Cup were like Samoa and New Zealand. And that's a cultural thing. Run it straight, go big, hit shoulders, hit chest. Other teams concentrated on going lower, which means you miss more tackles, but you don't get carded as much. So you're rewarding the people who were not doing it right, and you're getting away with all this history of being sent off for something. Then they announced that they're going to broaden the trial. They said it successfully was trialed. How? Success what? What was the metric? What frame of issue were you putting on it? They said something about there's no evidence of more concussions. That wasn't the issue. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get carded, like tripping someone gets red card, but now it won't. The whole thing gets pushed down. It's more lenient about respect, how the game looks, and it's soft. It's soft to do that. And if you think there aren't teams out there when it really mattered on a real knockout match that wouldn't sort of think about this as a way to manipulate the rules and take someone out early, you're crazy. You're imagining that every human being is just as noble and good and pure as you. But there are people who would take you out and just go, okay, but it's just 20 minutes. I'll take out your best player and I'm 20 minutes back. Let's go. So I don't think it was well thought through. And I think also the communication strategy is demeaning. And I don't think they do it the right way. I think they should be honest. and say, here's our white paper. Here's what we found. Here are every single incident. Here's what we did. Here's what we found. Here was the effect of having a red 20. And I think you'd see that the effect was as we predicted. You got far less straight reds. You actually got a little bit less yellows. And you basically got to a position where you had plausible deniability in the class action, in the referee bashing stakes, and in the keeping New Zealand happy.
Keeping New Zealand happy. There we go. Getting to the crux of the matter right at the end. Let's talk about Saints versus Bordeaux. And I said to you before they played, I'll know who I support when the game starts. And lo and behold, I felt like I wanted the Saints to win. It's completely a surprise to me. With all the South Africans, Rowan Jansen van Rensburg and Heine Adams and everybody else with Bordeaux, I wanted Saints to win. What the hell? What was going on, Harry? Why did I do that? Why did I feel like that?
I don't know. I actually, in this match, I almost really think I stayed neutral throughout. It became so interesting to me that you had a team that was hanging on for dear life, the Saints, starting really well, doing everything that we said. If the Saints were going to win, then, like if Bordeaux plays at a 9 out of 10 and Saints play 9 out of 10, Bordeaux wins easily. If Saints play a 10 out of 10, their best game ever, and Bordeaux's 9 out of 10, Bordeaux probably still wins. If it's 8 versus 10, then you start to have problems. So Saints didn't play their 10 out of 10. But there were moments where their grit and their courage and their stick-to-itiveness from the pack, from unheralded players like Alex Coles, Josh Kemeny, Dingwall, there were people out there just grafting. And I thought, ooh, could it be? Could they still pull it off with an 8 out of 10 performance? But then Bordeaux found their 8 or 9, and that was the problem. Once they found their 8 or 9, that early smash you in the face moment, which was pretty cool, red hot, opening 2 minutes of frantic attack and then 7-0 with an amazing dot down. You thought, ooh, what if, Then the first half kind of transpired with a lot of cross kicks, 2 wing attacks. Bordeaux kept bringing Louis Bielberry around and joining Penaud on the side to just create absolute mayhem. And at one point you thought, okay, now they're going to sweep them away. And then the Saints just crawled back in. Like, again, I think, what they did is they basically did almost everything clever that you're supposed to do. But sitting here at the halftime, what I saw was an ominous sign. 3 tries to 2 for Bordeaux on far fewer carries, far less meters run, but they developed more breaks and beaten more defenders. And I thought, how are they doing that? And then I looked across at the kicks. They kicked 7 more times in the first half. They had regained 5 kicks, and Northampton Saints hadn't. Now, regaining kicks is the quickest ball of all. Tell me about -3 second rucks, whatever. I'll give you all those, but I want to get 5 regained kicks and you get none. I win. Because there's nothing behind you. It's chaos. There's cards waiting for me. Maybe you challenge me in the air. And so Tommy Freeman, who has to, move to 15 because of early injuries, now he gets carded. So your danger man's off. There's a line break that's on steroids, because now your line break basically has only cover defense and corner flagging to stop me. And it's efficient. All I got to do is catch a ball, kick a ball, chase a ball. I regain it. That exerted so much less energy than cleaning a ruck, and then hoping that I get to 20 rucks before I pierce your line. So then the interesting part becomes, in oranges, who changes what? And when I looked across from first off, which at the end was 5 regained kicks to none, 22 kicks to 15, kick meters about 600 to 440. By the end of the game, 1,000 kick meters by Bordeaux, 8 regained kicks, and 38 total kicks in the air off the foot. And so that, first of all, what that did is it changed territory. So territory switched from being pro Saints in the end to pro Bordeaux. They never had as much ball. I think Bordeaux is a classic case of these knockout winning Springbok type teams that says, I don't want all the ball, so I'll take 46, 45% of the ball. I will build far less rucks. Bordeaux only built 60 rucks, whereas the Saints were trying to build 100 and got to about 90. Offloads about similar, but more passes in the air by Saints. Therefore, more things you can spill and more options for Louis Bielbarré. So in the end, Saints couldn't score in the second half. They tried. They had a good move with Pollock right at the jump, but in the end, it was not enough. So in the end, I think it was one season too soon for the Saints. Finn Smith up against Jalibert. It looked like Jalibert had just too much experience. Luku up against Alex Mitchell, and Luku was magisterial. He was the guy on the field that always seemed to know Farid Dupria type, who maybe doesn't get picked over Antoine Dupont, but maybe in the fullness of time, you look back and go, maybe he should have. Or maybe it should have been horses for courses, because he really did control that match. In the end, you had cross kicks. You had a lot of good fake moves. And I think also you had this advent of not taking the three, which can really hurt a team in the knockouts. There were a couple of moments where the Saints could have just taken a three. They went to the corner. It didn't come off. And then their sails just became very slack. You could just tell they were really drooping. Never really gave up, but I think Henry Pollock, a year from now, will be highly motivated. 2 years from now, Finn Smith will have the presence of mind to control the game. And maybe they have to control the game from 10, not from 9. I thought it was actually an interesting game and fun to watch. It wasn't the classic sort of forward struggle. Both packs, I think, were good enough. Guido Petty, I thought, was really good for Bordeaux. Pete Samu as well. So in the end, probably the loose trio without Troki. If there was one guy missing in that game that would have given it more shape, was probably Troki. I just think there were moments in the red zone, deep in the red zone, where they were looking for one guy to make the kind of carry that Moafana did for Bordeaux, which set up the wide try. Jalibert could do the dancing feet and he could find someone, sure. But I think for the Saints, they needed that battle stations, go, take 3 guys with me, carry 3 tacklers with me, set the gain line even closer, and then go. So I think that's a missed opportunity. And now, obviously Troki's on the way out to, is it Ulster? So, I think the Saints will have to restock their pack and be a little more powerful there, and then, learn these lessons.
I think you pointed it out for me why I supported Saints, because they were underdogs. Typically South African and more typically Praetorian. I go for the underdog. Yeah, subconsciously even looks like. Talking about Pollock, you had the little gesture, he took his pulse and everything else. Now people are mocking him. And that's an indication of what a character he's becoming. I'm looking forward to this guy, in the fullness of time, like you mentioned. He's going to be one of those guys you're going to remember, going forward.
Yeah, what did someone say? He has terrible player energy, just waiting to break out, in the best possible way. Like, he doesn't mind taking on the focus of villainy. At the whistle, Jalibert gets mixed up with one of the Saints players, and then there's a scuffle, and then, players run in. Instead of addressing Jalibert and whoever it was he was scuffling with, all the Bordeaux players went straight for Henry Pollock's neck. And it's a moment of instinct. Like, they hate that guy already. He's 20 years old. Wallabies, Aussies in general, really good at getting under your skin. So they're going to come hard at Henry. And if he does get onto the test paddock and try to play against them, there's going to be, those are going to wind up. He's going to have to learn to deal with that. And let me tell you this. I think my sense is he's okay with that. And he's got a bright fire burning. He's a Skulk Burger type, right? Wow. So he's going to come even harder. He's going to lift even more weights. He's going to do something to reinvent himself. He's going to get a tattoo on his face. I don't know. Something's going to happen where he's going to say, oh yeah, let's see. And I want to be on the sidelines watching that. I'm front and center, because I think Henry Pollock is the kind of player we need in the game. cannot always have just the same good guys running around doing good guy stuff. And there were two moments in the game that could have changed the whole. One was the streak away, run away try that was disallowed because of the lineout mischief, and the other one was when he was following the kick and he was ruled to be just ahead of the kicker. I mean, those are little tiny moments, and in both cases, his speed was superlative. So yeah, I think there's plenty of rugby yet to play for him. What Saints will have to do is take the three, manage the field. They're going to have to get much stingier on 22 entries, and their scramble defense is not up to par. So this was a cup run. They're not there yet. They're not the best team in England. Bath is. And then Tigers and Sale will have something to say about that too. Both of them are a little bit more premiership style teams. So I think Saints have the magic. They need to add a little bit more starch, a little bit more grind down. It's just too difficult to win a game when you allow 4 tries.
Right, let's get to the club championship. And before we do that, we have to talk about the latest Harry index. I'm going to put it on the screen here, but I'm going to read it out as well, just so people have, know what I'm talking about. Firstly, you've got Bordeaux here as the best team in the world, followed by the Chiefs, which I, cocked an eyebrow at, then Leinster, then Bath, then Toulouse, then the Bulls, only at 6th place, then Toulon, then Saints, Tigers, and the Crusaders. And bubbling under, Brumbies, Stormers, Sharks, Sale, Glasgow, Bayonne, and the Hurricanes. And I think you've expanded a little bit to make provision for a top 16, which is we're going to be looking at in the Club World Championship. Talk to me about that, and why do you think the Club World Championship, as it is flawed?
Yeah, so Harry, in the latest Harry index, it acknowledges the fact that within Super Rugby, there's really just one team running now. It's the Chiefs, and they're markedly better for the season as a whole. It's going to be very surprising to the index if the Chiefs don't win going away with the best coach, the best philosophy, really hard pack, wonderful backs. I think they've set themselves apart. And Bordeaux seems to be also kind of putting some distance between themselves and the pack in the top 14, which is really hard because top 14 is very strong. Super Rugby as a whole has slipped down. I don't even really think, unless the Crusaders can do something magical, that they can hold off these bubble teams. I think one of these or two of these bubble teams are going to supplant Crusaders, and I don't see it being the Brumbies, quite frankly. But they're still a bubble team because they're right there. So actually, it looks to me like the IRC is one of those leagues that something really interesting might happen. We've had this premise all year long that Leinster was the be-all and end-all. Now we know they're not. There's something missing, and it's not the player sheet. The team sheet's amazing. 900 caps, Jordy Barrett, Achis Neyman. There's something else missing. It's probably at the top level. It's probably not being refreshed enough. It's probably old, tired ideas. It's probably the weight of playing so many games for your country and your club in the same way. Maybe there's also a downside to too much cohesion. Maybe it's boring. I don't know. But there's something going on there. So the avenue is open for the Bulls. All the Bulls have to do is, there's only one hope, which is you hope that Toulouse fade, and then you take over Leinster. If the Bulls beat Leinster or the winners of the IRC, now they're in that conversation with Bordeaux. They're probably better than the Chiefs because the league is marginally better. And that's where it ends. I don't know if there's an ability to leapfrog Bordeaux unless Bordeaux shits the bed in the top 14, and that could happen. Like if you have those characters, Jalibert, Penaud, and those people, who knows? So it's intriguing setup. Bath has obviously stated a claim, but they have a lot to do as well because Tigers are on the top 10 of the Harry Index, and they're waiting to take them down. Michael Cheika is a very good tournament coach, and what's about to happen is a little mini tournament where you're just planning for one thing. You're getting, I talked to Michael Cheika. He tells me his main word is ruthlessness. That's what he always comes back to. And I'll say, hey, coach, what do you think? Are you guys ready? Can you win this? He's like, we're not ruthless enough yet. And I think Andre Pollard and Handel Liebenberg and Julio Montoya, those guys are definitely ruthless players. And I think he's right to build it around that, to make sure that he has that spirit. So I think that you're looking at here is someone from the bubble, maybe a couple teams might still sneak in, but you're probably looking at the top teams, and there's a significant amount of change that could happen in the order. Of note, I'm going to point to a team like Toulouse and Toulon. If they're fading and they keep fading, it'll let other teams in. The Harry Index attempts to address a hole in rugby, which is because of our time zones, hemispheres, and disparate competitions, and the delusion of Europeans thinking that the Champions Cup finds us who the real champion is of club champion. It doesn't, because it leaves New Zealand out. It tries to sort of mold that. And then between the competitions, because there's a league angle and a cup angle, and a team like Saints can get hot in the cup and disproportionately look better than it really is, it tries to do that. Also tries to look at the leagues as a whole. And right now, the top 14 their middle is the strongest. Right now, the Prem has kind of a big disparity between bottom and the top, maybe one of the worst bottoms. The ERC has a big bunch, and then it has a premise around Leinster that was going to be examined by the Bulls, examined by somebody. Somebody's going to examine their credentials, and there's an opportunity there. And then Super Rugby Pacific is, very weak. It's weak because as they keep taking out teams that are like the Melbourne Rebels, even a team like the Force, which should do better, doesn't do any better. As you make the Moana Pacifica a little bit better, they still get found out to the tune of whatever you said, 85-7. So you have to do some kind of ranking system. Every great competition that people rally around forever, whether it's horse racing and the odds and who gets the proper position, Formula One, pole position, Wimbledon, seedings, which was built, in the 1920s, 1930s, when they finally said, we're not going to invite people from around the world to come play tennis, and they get our favorite get knocked out, or two favorites play each other in early rounds. So they invented seeding. Even when you play the Rugby World Cup, when you have the pools, you make sure that it makes sense, even if you do it a little bit too long before the cup. If you did a Rugby Club World Championship and you use the current proposed system, you get very stupid results where you have teams like the Bulls or Bath not even getting into the World Championship, but you have Moana Pacifica that just got toweled 85-7 to squeeze in, with losing records, with negative points differential, will get in the name of having geographical buy-in, participation. We've already learned a long time ago in Super Rugby, when you try to do that and you have Sun Wolves and you have Jaguares and you have conferences and you try to gerrymander some kind of result, you engineer artificially some sort of result, it doesn't really work. What you really want to see, if you're claiming to do the best of the best, is see the best of the best face each other in later rounds. You want to have an early go where, there's above, middle, facing above. And so if you use the Harry Index, for example, I just put one together, you would have, if you had 16 teams, you'd have Bordeaux playing the Stormers, Bath playing the Sharks, Tigers playing Crusaders. That'd be a hell of a fight. Chiefs against Bayonne. Then you'd have Toulouse against Bristol, Toulon against Glasgow, Bulls versus Brumbies, tasty, and Leinster versus either the Hurricanes or maybe the Saints, depending on what was going on. Now, that sounds like a really cool tournament, because when, if it follows form, then you have really cool matchups. You have Bordeaux playing the Chiefs, you have Toulouse playing Leinster, and in the middle, on the sort of round of the quarterfinals, you have really cool matchups like Bath Tigers and you have Toulon Bulls. And you're pretty sure that what would come out of that would be amazing semifinals, and a true champion. You're going to have to do something like that, because the way it is right now is silly, and it will look like fabrication, and the fans will not get behind it as much as they want you to.
All right. It's a strong case to be made for the Harry Index. I think we've covered everything. It was quite a wide-ranging but yet quite deep discussion. Thanks, Harry. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.